talk with all of you. It's fun times. Always happy to get on here and have a chat. So if you're with us now, thanks a million. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Be sure to post this on Reddit. Be sure to post this on your Facebook. Be sure to post this on your Twitter. Be sure to drop this in a Facebook group and say, "Oh my God, did you just hear what Caleb said? I can't believe he just said that." Right? Say something like that, and that'll get their attention. Folks, it's going to be a fun one tonight. I don't know how long it's going to be. Last night I thought it was going to be short. It ended up being long, so who knows what's going to happen. I just thought it was about time I got on here. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. The way we do this is I give my opening rant, then we do the roll call where I call you out, names and locations, and we see who's with us tonight. And then from there, I answer your super chat questions. So hit the super chat. Keep the super chats rolling in. I'll answer them in the second half of the show. Let's just jump into it. Folks, if you watched last night when the topic of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, our esteemed freshman congresswoman, came up, ML YouTube channel, very good. When the topic of our esteemed freshman congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez came up, I said, look, she's wrong. Jimmy Dore is right in his criticism of her. But I encouraged people to not, jump on her. I said, she could get better. Let's hope. I tried to, keep it real. And that's generally the attitude that I have, right? When it comes to any progressive politician, right? Any political figure, I feel like we shouldn't be too dismissive. We shouldn't immediately jump up and condemn. We should be patient with people. We should praise what is good, not just jump on top of what is bad. There's way too much call-out culture, people just condemning each other, people just screaming, people being shrill. You disagreed with me on this. You disagreed with me on that. Twitter and social media, way too much negativity going on. The way you get things done in the real world is you associate with people with whom you don't agree on everything. You make alliances with people with whom you don't agree on everything. You shake hands, you make an agreement, you find common ground. So I was urging people to, while I agree with Jimmy Dore and his criticism and how, she should, stand up to Nancy Pelosi, I was telling people to chill out. Well, folks, after looking at how social media has gone for the past 48 hours, progressives, pro-imperialism. Folks, after seeing what's been going on social media, I decided that I'm just going to come out and say it. Folks, I have had it up to my gizzard with Jacobin. U.S. school system. I have had it up to my gizzard with Jacobin magazine, okay? They have always irked me and irritated me, and I have tried to be somewhat restrained until the last few months. I've tried to just, think, there's probably good people at Jacobin. There's probably people who start out reading Jacobin who could get better, so just hold it in. Just if Jacobin publishes an article you agree with, share it without comment, but just hold it in. Just hold it in. But I've had it up to here. I am so tired of Jacobin magazine. I am so sick of Jacobin. I am so sick of these self-appointed socialists. I've been doing the socialism thing since I was 15, okay? And these people, they stroll in, and all of a sudden they're the voice of socialism, and they annoy me, okay? I'll just be real about it. Jacobin annoys me. First thing first, right? Okay, let's just talk about the first thing about Jacobin that just really tells you what they're all about. The name. Folks, the name Jacobin. Who were the Jacobins? They were a faction in the French Revolution that was considered the more radical faction in the French Revolution that conducted mass executions, beheadings. They were well known for chopping people's heads off. They were, they had the Committee of Public Safety, John Paul Marat and Danton, and it was a rather bloodthirsty group of people, right? The Jacobins were not nice folks. They had good ideals. They brought down the monarchy, role of law enforcement. They brought down the monarchy. They were trying to build some kind of egalitarian society, and they were very radical liberals, I guess. They were a radical faction in the French Revolution. But, I might let them get away with having a magazine called Jacobin if these weren't the people. If their publication did not constantly condemn anybody who supports the Soviet Union. If you think the Soviet Union was a good country, well, you're just absolutely wrong. The Soviet Union was Stalinist. It was evil. You support modern China. Oh, my God, modern China is evil and wrong. If you support Cuba, oh my God, they've dumped on Venezuela. They have dumped on any progressive socialist country around the world. They've dumped on. But their name is Jacobin. Okay, if Stalin's bad because Stalin kills people. Russia or China's bad because Mao kills people. Right? Cuba's bad because Cuba kills people. But hey, these French people after the revolution ain't that great. We're going to name our publication after them. I mean, it is the most blatant Western chauvinism. I mean, it is really unbelievable. I mean, folks, I'm thinking, we tankies. What if we came out with a publication and we called it, because the Jacobins, a group of people that went around chopping people's heads off without really due process or trial, big, crowds of people cheering as they're beheading people, right? Rather violent group of people. What if we had a publication and we called it Gulag Security Team? You think that would be okay? Let's have a publication called Gulag Security Team. Or I know, we'll have a tanky publication, and we'll call it a Berlin Wall Attendant. Berlin Wall Attendant. How would that go? I mean, give me a break. Right? These people go around shaming and condemning anybody who defends Cuba, anyone who defends Venezuela, and their publication is called Jacobin. It's literally named after people who cut people's heads off, who conducted mass executions, okay? I mean, you can't make this up. The hypocrisy there is beyond anything, right? It's not something they defend. It's the actual name of their publication. But see, the Jacobins were in France. We're in France. And France is a Western European country. See? And it was a Western European revolution against feudalism to bring up Western liberal values. Because the West is the best. That's what the Proud Boys chant. Did you know that? The racist Proud Boys, the white supremacist group of Trump supporters that were in D.C. over the weekend and Olympia, Washington, scuffling people, they chant, West is the best. That's one of their chants. That should be the mantra of the Jacobin magazine. That should be the mantra of Vosh. That should be the mantra of Skippy the Bear. All these people. West is the best. West is the best. Yes, when we cut off people's heads, it's good. It serves liberal ideals. But anybody who dares, defend the Eastern socialism, oh, no. For them, socialism is about spreading Western, liberal, individualist ideas across the planet, even if it means mass death and killing, like the Jacobins did. And so there you go. Now, obviously, though, I have a bigger beef with them than just their name, because I've been following them for years, folks. I mean, as somebody who's into socialism and religion, as someone who's been in the socialist movement and been around the socialist movement for a long time, Fort Hood, I've been following these things. So, all right. So one way that you can keep track of who is actually doing good work and getting things done in the socialist movement is very good. It's a great way to tell how someone's doing good work. Jacobin dumps on them. I'm serious, right? Tulsi Gabbard, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, right? All of a sudden, she was speaking up about Syria. She was exposing the crimes of the so-called rebels that were being funded by the U.S. government. She was building she's a Bernie-crat, healthcare for all, but on top of that, then she wanted to legalize marijuana, and she was building like a Bernie Sanders campaign that was actually anti-imperialist. So of course, Tulsi Gabbard she gets attacked by Jacobin, right? Immediately, they run an article. Tulsi Gabbard is not your friend. And they run this whole big article, right? Why? Because she was doing some good work, right? Tulsi Gabbard was actually exposing the crimes of imperialism. Tulsi Gabbard was running a version of Bernie Sanders' campaign that was actually anti-imperialist, right? She was a Democrat who was not only a socialist in terms of domestic stuff, but was actually critical of imperialism, so they attacked her. Another great example, India. November 18th of this year, right as the farmers of India are going out on protesting, leading up to what eventually became the big strike that's happening in India right now, where 250 million workers went out on strike, as the workers of India start to pour into the streets against Modi and his neoliberal cutbacks regimes. What happens? Jacobin takes a big dump on the workers of India. And they publish this whole article about the Indian left is failing. It's failing. Really? Well, when's the last time Bernie Sanders called out 250 million workers on strike? When's the last time that the Trotskyite College Professor Association has called out anything that had any impact on the U.S. economy? But oh no, November 18th, just as the Indian left is revving up to finally get things done, they take a giant dump all over the communist groups of India, the Communist Party of India Marxist, the Communist Party of India, all of them just blah, oh, the Indian left sucks, it's failing. Why? It's getting something done. Venezuela, right? Venezuela was under all-out attack, right? And people were worried that they were going to fall, but, the Maduro has gotten them through the worst of it, right? And they've gotten through the food crisis, and they're getting stronger every day. And you'll notice that Jacobin, which had been wasn't exactly clear, as soon as Venezuela was ready to fight and was winning, all of a sudden Jacobin took a giant dump on Venezuela, right? And you can bet, right now they're supporting the government of Bolivia. You can bet that if the government of Bolivia actually starts doing good things, Jacobin will take a giant dump on them as well. And it's like predictable what Jacobin is going to do. If anyone is actually going to do anything good, Tulsi Gabbard in the United States, Indian workers and Indian labor unions, the Venezuelan government, if anyone is actually doing anything good around the world, right? The Belt and Road, they've attacked China for the Belt and Road. Anyone's actually going to get anything done, they attack them, right? And of course, now are they supporting Jimmy Dore and saying that, hey, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez should stand up more to Nancy Pelosi? Of course not. They've admitted now, just earlier tonight, with Jimmy Dore, a Jacobin writer admitted that he opposed actually standing up to Nancy Pelosi. He admitted this. And they ran an article saying that, no, we don't support Jimmy Dore's call to actually stand up to Nancy Pelosi. I mean, give me a break. I mean, this is a publication that anybody that is actually doing anything good to oppose war, to oppose racism, to oppose what's going on, they take a dump on them, right? But they're edgy. They're oh so edgy. They're so edgy. So edgy. Edgy. Oh my God, read them. They're just so edgy. It is like got the most hipster. Every so often they do something that is completely wacky, but it's designed to make them feel edgy. Like my favorite, this was, during the Ferguson uprising. Folks remember the Ferguson uprising near St. Louis? There's this town called Ferguson. The people of the town are rising up against the police. Of course, the Revolutionary Communist Party, the RCP, went to Ferguson. And of course, they're telling the people, hey, if you Bobavakian is the answer. Join the Maoist communist revolution. Get down with the revolution, man. And their RCP is acting kind of silly. The Bobavakian cult is acting wacky in Ferguson. And, they're on social media. So, I kid you not, Jacobin runs an article defending the RCP in Ferguson. Right? At the whole moment, everyone's telling the RCP, hey, you're being a little cringe here. You're all white and the people here are black and you're saying wacky stuff. Can you just chill? They ran an article defending the Revolutionary Communist Party. They can't defend Venezuela, can't defend Tulsi Gabbard, can't criticize AOC, can't support the workers of India. But Bob Avakian's, newspaper selling club and they ran an article, this big long article in defense of outside agitators. And then of course they're walking around like, "Oh, look at us. We defended the Maoist group that went to Ferguson. Yes, look how edgy we are." They always do something to try and make it look like they're edgy or something. It is ridiculous, right? So they'll defend Bob Avakian, but they won't defend Tulsi Gabbard. They won't defend the workers of India. They won't defend Venezuela. It is obnoxious. Obnoxious. Leftist YouTubers. Obnoxious. It has this fake edginess to it, folks. Now, I don't take credit for this, right? It was not my work. I did not discover this. But Ben Norton and the folks at Gray Zone did some basic research into who funds Jacobin. And they discovered that the primary financial backer of Jacobin magazine is an entity called the Jewish Communal Fund. The Jewish Communal Fund is a pro-Israel lobby group. They run pro-Israel campus tours. They fund J Street, which is a pro-Israel but critical, a more liberal pro-Israel lobby group. And they fund tours where they take college kids from the United States and fly them to Israel. And unlike Birthright, which is like the right-wing one, they give more liberal tours where they admit some of the bad things they do. And the Jewish Communal Fund, which is pro-Israel. It doesn't matter that they're Jewish. I don't care that they're Jewish. Their religion is their business, right? And that's not the thing. I know a lot of people who practice Judaism, have Jewish heritage. Forget the word Jewish. That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But this is a pro-Israel group, right? A group a group that does pro-Israeli lobbying, right? And lobbies college students, lobbies people in the United States, actually funds J Street, which lobbies on Capitol Hill, right, for Israel. So a pro-Israeli lobby group is funding Jacobin magazine. And, I mean, you think that might be an issue? And then people say to me, look, they published this article that criticized Israel. Well, gee, I know a publication, another publication that criticizes Israel. You know what it's called? Haaretz. There's another publication that's always criticizing Israeli policy. You know what it's called? It's called the Jerusalem Post, right? Oh, Jacobin wrote this article criticizing Israel. Proves nothing, right? I mean, I'm sorry. There are disagreements in Israeli politics. Let me break this down for you. Not all Israelis agree with every Israeli government policy. See, Israel is a country, and it has rival political parties in it. Now, there's this party called Likud, which is led by Netanyahu, and they like Donald Trump, see. But there's this other party in Israel called the Israeli Labor Party that pretends to be a socialist party, see. They don't like Donald Trump, right? Netanyahu came to the United States and gave a speech against Barack Obama. Remember that? And a lot of Israeli generals, a lot of Israeli military people told Netanyahu not to do that. You see, not everyone in Israel agrees on everything. Israel is not a secret conspiracy. Israel is not a vast plot. It's not a thing upon a thing. Israel is a country, see? Israel is a country. And just like Saudi Arabia, and just like Turkey, and just like Britain, and just like China, there are lobby groups in the United States that support Israel. And one of those lobby groups is called the Jewish Communal Fund. And that is who pays for Jacobin. Is this hard for people to understand? Like, what in what I just said was anti-Semitic? I mean, what in what I just said immediately? If you point this out, do they deny it? No. Do they say, well, that's okay? No. They just say anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism. It's like it's not anti-Semitic, right? I mean, I work for media from Russia, right? I work for a TV network from Russia. If anyone points that out, do I say to them, you're anti-Russian? No, right? I think it's a great outfit. I'm very proud of the work that I do. DSA. DSA, JCF. I'm proud of the work that I do, right? But is it a fact that the company that I work for is from Russia? Yes. And does that, I mean, is that a bigoted, ethnically racist statement? No. Are there things published, by the media outlet that I work for that are critical of Russia? Yes. Yes, there are, right? They report on the criticisms of the Communist Party sometimes. They report on the criticisms of the Liberal Democratic Party. I mean, so just pointing out that the primary financial backer of this magazine, that has been anointed as the voice of socialism, is an Israeli lobby group, is not offensive and not anti-Semitic. And the fact that they go there immediately, if you bring this up, if you go there, they just, anti-Semite, anti-Semite, anti-Semite. If the fact that they go there shows that they are very defensive about that. They are very, very defensive about that. And that I've noticed that people want to pretend it's not true. It's on their tax forms. Ben Norton revealed this, right? I mean, he just posted on Twitter their tax forms. It's not a secret. It is a matter of public record that Jacobin magazine is funded by Israeli lobby groups. That is a fact. That is a fact. Okay? Wrote it down. It's a fact. Okay? And if you bring it up, they just shout anti-Semite and they don't want to talk about it. Now, it's also a little bit interesting, and the folks at Gray Zone, Ben Norton, they have really dug into this. At Jacobin's public conferences, this is a socialist group, so you think that you would have people at your conference that are advocates of socialism, right? I mean, if you're going to have people from around the world at your conferences as a socialist organization, you would have people from socialist governments, you'd have people from socialist parties. At Jacobin's conferences, they have people that are trying to overthrow the socialist government of China, automation, and thank you, Jazz No Jazz. They have people that are trying to overthrow the socialist government of Venezuela. They have people that are trying to overthrow the socialist government of Bolivia. They have all kinds of people at their conferences that are involved in U.S.-backed imperialist efforts to overthrow socialist governments. And they give them a platform, and they have all kinds of people who come to their conference. Oh, look, it's a socialist conference. And they hear that, we got to overthrow the government of Nicaragua. We got to overthrow the government of Venezuela. We got to overthrow the Syrian government. Jacobin, as a voice of socialism, goes around basically trying to convince leftists to overthrow and help overthrow socialist governments. Like, if that's not in and of itself disturbing. Now, another thing I wanted to mention about them, this is just thing. I've been listening to the Young Turks for years. I mean, they're on YouTube, whatever. They're around. So today I went to the page, I went to the, the internet. I'm watching all these fighting, this fight, Jimmy Dore versus AOC and all this stuff go down. So I'm looking at, one of these Young Turks, Young Turks hosts or whatever, who's criticizing Jimmy Dore, is Anna Kasparian. And I recognize Anna Kasparian, right? Young Turks, very famous, right? Yeah, Anna Kasparian. Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks, I look, she's listed as Jacobin. And I'm like, that can't be right. Anna Kasparian? Jacobin? Anna Kasparian's not a Marxist, okay? I mean, she's good, she's friendly, I don't disagree with some of the things she says, but she's not a Marxist. But no, according to Jacobin, she is, right? Jacobin, Anna Kasparian's a Marxist. Anna Kasparian is a Marxist. The Venezuelans aren't, but Anna Kasparian is. Leftist, all right. Leftists. Anna Kasparian is a Marxist? Really? Anna Kasparian is a Marxist. I mean, that was the first one I heard. But folks, if you really want to get into who Jacobin are, right? And we can talk about the JCF, Israeli lobby group that funds them. We can talk about we can talk about a lot of different things about them. But if you really want to know who they are, okay, you have to look into, there's a trend in U.S. history called State Department socialism, right? Michael Harrington. Do people know the name Michael Harrington? Michael Harrington. So Michael Harrington He was a Shachtmanite Trotskyist, right? He was a follower of Max Shachtman. And he was a follower of Max Shachtman, and he wrote a book called The Other America, which was about poverty. And he was hired to work in the administration of Lyndon Johnson, and to run some poverty programs. And Michael Harrington was his name, and he had been a Shachtmanite Trotskyist. And Max Shachtman, his mentor, supported the Bay of Pigs invasion. And he was somewhat supportive of the Vietnam War, eventually changed his position and opposed the Vietnam War, but at first he supported the Vietnam War. And he was, you Google Michael Harrington, he was a State Department socialist. Nazi economics. State Department socialist. And so as the 1970s went on, right, he was a member of the Socialist Party, but he was basically a Democrat, functioning in the Democrats', wing of government. So the Socialist Party, you have to remember, was very diverse, right? Different people were in it and such. And the 1960s was happening. You had Students for a Democratic Society, and different groups were out protesting. And so the Socialist Party collapsed in the 1970s, and it divided into three factions. And the issue really, in essence, was the Vietnam War. They could not agree on the Vietnam War. There was one faction in the Socialist Party that was 100% against the Vietnam War. And that faction, they formed the Socialist Party USA. And they're still around. They function mainly as an electoral formation. They run for office, SPUSA. They run people for office. That's the Socialist Party of America. I believe the leader of the Socialist Party at the time that it broke away from, at the time the American Socialist Party broke apart and you had Socialist Party USA formed, their leader was the first openly gay man to run for president, David McReynolds. And I interviewed David McReynolds many times. He was an openly gay man. He was a pacifist. He was 100% against the Vietnam War. So there was the Socialist Party USA. Then there was a faction that supported the Vietnam War, of socialists who supported the Vietnam War, were like supporters of it. And they became Social Democrats USA. And eventually they endorsed Ronald Reagan. They were socialists for Reagan. They went the other way. There was this faction in the middle. And it was probably the majority. It was the biggest faction in the Socialist Party when it broke apart in the 70s. That was kind of against the Vietnam War. Emphasis on kind of. Like, not completely against the Vietnam War, but kind of. That's the faction, led by Michael Harrington, that went on to found Democratic Socialists of America. Irving Howe. You can read about Irving Howe. He was another Trotskyite, another friend of Max Shachtman. Irving Howe, he wrote for the New York Times. He would be their go-to socialist when it was time to dump on the new left. He wrote articles accusing leftists who protested Israel of anti-Semitism. He wrote articles attacking Students for a Democratic Society and the Weather Underground for left adventurism. He was the New York Times go-to Marxist when they needed a Marxist to dump on the socialist movement. His name is Irving Howe. And Irving Howe, older Trotskyite, and he actually was quoted as saying that he believed the socialist movement was a faction of the West in the Cold War, right? And that was his big moment. He had a big fight with Max Shachtman, and one of his defining moments was he said he believed that socialism was a faction of the West, of the Western camp in the Cold War. So there you go. Statement on Biden's statement. And so that was Irving Howe, right? There's a story about Irving Howe that apparently Irving Howe was on a college campus, and a young Maoist yelled at him, was saying, "You're a sellout, you're a phony." And he said to this young Maoist, he said, "You know what you're going to be? You're going to be a dentist." I don't even know how that's an insult, right? I don't understand that. But apparently I've asked people and they've said, well, that's kind of a classist dig. That's saying that you're gonna stop being a socialist, and you're gonna have to start, being an irrelevant working class person or an irrelevant figure in U.S. society. You're gonna be a dentist. That's the kind of person that Irving Howe was. Apparently, this young Maoist is yelling at him. He says, "You're gonna be a dentist, kid." That was the kind of person he was. Irving Howe. That's the kind of tone, right? There's actually a documentary. Irving Howe was apparently very good friends with Irving Kristol, who's considered the godfather of neoconservatism. There's a documentary. Which mar- all right, which party? There's a documentary called "Arguing the World" that was on PBS, and it's about four friends at City College in New York City in the 1930s who were Trotskyites. And one of them was Irving Kristol, who became the godfather of neoconservatism. The other was Irving Howe, who became like one of the founding intellectuals of DSA, along with Michael Harrington. The other two, I don't even remember their names, but they were all Trotskyites, and they were all good friends, good buddies, and they hated the Communist Party, right? And the Communist Party was the other table, and they were Stalinists, and they hated them. And PBS made this documentary in the late 90s all about, hey, these four good buddies, and one of them became the top neocon, and the other became the top DSA guy, and they were all good buddies, and they were all good friends, and they hated those evil Stalinists. Those Stalinists were no good, were they? And it was on PBS. And so Irving Howe, Michael Harrington, they are the State Department socialist trend. That's who they are. So, they break apart. They form something called Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee. And you have to remember, the world was changing in the 1970s. China was changing a lot. China no longer, the Maoist movement was kind of falling apart. The Cold War, there was détente, and the Cold War was kind of de-escalating. So a magazine called In These Times was published by Michael Harrington. And it was this liberal magazine. And the message of In These Times was kind of like, that it was something like, it was like, Leninism is un-American, right? That America is a democratic country. We have beautiful democratic traditions in the United States, and Leninism and Bolshevism are totalitarian and un-American. That was kind of the mantra of In These Times, right? It was this kind of liberal, socialisty magazine that was very, very anti-Marxist, Leninist, anti-Soviet, anti-Chinese, etc. And that was called In These Times. And Harrington and all of them put it out. And eventually you had the founding of Democratic Socialists of America. And some of the Maoist groups that collapsed even went into it. Like there was a group called the Democratic Workers' Party, which was led by Jean Dixon. It was kind of a strange Maoist feminist party. And in the 1980s, as China was changing, they were getting closer to the government of Romania, and they just dissolved, and all their members joined Democratic Socialists of America. There were some others like this, right? And as the Maoist movement was crashing and burning, like remnants of the Communist Workers' Party went into DSA, and it was kind of when the Maoists kind of threw in the towel, right? As the Maoist groups, right, they had been, in the 70s, they'd been trying to form a new communist party. It was going to be so revolutionary. When they surrendered and they said, all right, we give up, they all joined DSA. That's basically what DSA was. It was their, like, surrender. It was the equivalent of waving the white flag. When you were a communist revolutionary, when you were a Maoist, when you were a serious revolutionary, when you surrendered, you held up the white flag and said, I joined DSA, I joined Michael Harrington. That's basically what it was. The Michael Harrington trend, that's what DSA was for many years. And, people used to joke that DSA was kind of, it was almost like a fraternity. Right, a lot of labor bureaucrats, labor union bosses were in DSA, and it was kind of, it was basically it was a banquet that happened once a year, and Cornel West was in it, and a lot of well-known intellectuals were in it. Gloria Steinem, do folks know Gloria Steinem, the editor of Ms. Magazine? She was the voice, the leading feminist of the 1970s, and she was well known. She admitted she was a CIA operative in the early 60s. In her autobiography, she brags about being a CIA agent. There was even rumors that she was dating Henry Kissinger for a long time. That turned out to be false, but her boyfriend was for a long time. At the time of COINTELPRO, her boyfriend was a guy at the Department of Justice, home ownership, and, she was deep state if there ever was anybody, Gloria Steinem. And Gloria Steinem, in her autobiography, she talks about being a CIA operative. She was a founding member of the DSA. Absolutely, she was a founding member of the DSA, and DSA was just this big tent that if you could join and you wanted to surrender, you could just join the DSA. Now, in the 90s, you have to remember, so the 90s, you have the fall of the Soviet Union, you have Bill Clinton getting in there and NAFTA, so the labor movement is taking a kind of an interesting shift, and so John Sweeney becomes the head of the AFL-CIO, and he's a DSA guy. So people thought DSA was kind of a labor union activist association. That was kind of what people thought DSA was. And then, you'll remember 9/11 and the time of the Iraq War happened. And that's when I first started getting politically active. It was the time of the Iraq War. And at that time, people didn't know DSA still existed. Right? DSA's name, there'd be a big anti-war rally in Washington, D.C., and there'd be 112 organizations would sign on, and the Democratic Socialists of America, their name would be on the list, and people would be like, are they still around? It was very, very weird. All right, 89.7%. No. It was a very, very weird group. And it was just kind of this strange association. But then, biggest change of opinion. But then, yeah, DSA, yeah, but then, around the time of Wisconsin, do you folks remember Wisconsin, when, it was in 2011, the labor unions were occupying the state capitol building in Wisconsin to protest their right to work law, their law that was going to hurt organized labor. And you started to hear DSA get more credibility. The first day of Occupy Wall Street, I went to Occupy Wall Street on the first day, September 17th. I'd been at some of the planning meetings, and there was a group of people that helped into power. Saddam West. There was a group of people that were like circling the park, and they had this big red banner that said Democratic Socialists of America, and they had their faces covered in like red bandanas, and they almost looked like the Black Bloc, but they were the Democratic Socialists of America. This is where DSA comes from, right? It is a strange current. It's a lot of academics. It's a lot of college professors. It's a lot of people that have worked in the administration of various presidents, and that's who set up Jacobin Magazine. Now, what does that mean? Well, that's who they are, right? DSA is a great place, and after all that I've just said, if I were not, I am at the point in my life, I have a job where I am a journalist, and because of that, I cannot join any political organization. I cannot, because that would threaten my independence. If I were a card-carrying member of any political activist group, any political party, I would not be able to do my job. If, however, I were not in the position I'm in, I would probably join the DSA to meet people, right? Because DSA is a great place to meet people. I've been to DSA events, and especially you go to Long Island, you go to Illinois, you go to New Jersey, you go to Kentucky, you go to Alabama. DSA is where you meet people. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, they're recruiting, they have a lot of people, and if you go to the local DSA meetup, that's where you meet anybody who's interested in socialism. That is the place you will meet them. So, Students for a Democratic Society in the 1960s was a very similar thing. It was started by the same kind of people. Michael Harrington was involved in it, Tom Hayden, right? And it was a similar kind of operation. It was this kind of, mass group that suddenly had lots of money that was with a mass socialist organizing group. But that everybody knew back then that if you were a communist or a leftist or a revolutionary, if you were actually a revolutionary, SDS meetings were where you went to meet good people. And eventually, we know SDS got more and more radical, and pretty soon it was dominated by Maoist factions. So I'm not telling people DSA is your enemy. I'm not telling people to spit on DSA. I think you should all go to DSA events. I think you should all join the DSA and try to meet people at DSA events. Try to talk to them about actual socialism and anti-imperialism. But just keep in mind, who's at the top of the DSA? Who's at the top of the DSA? Right? Who started this trend? Jacobin Magazine. Look, I will never forget. I first heard of Jacobin Magazine when I was it was years ago, and all of a sudden, like, All In with Chris Hayes, right? Which is like a mainstream NBC show, is doing a segment about a socialist magazine that has just opened up. So MSNBC, keep in mind, NBC used to be owned by General Electric, one of the main military contractors, right? NBC, All In with Chris Hayes, they're like, hey, we're just going to do a segment to promote a socialist magazine opening up. Why not? And they just did a whole segment. Hey, guys, did you know that a new socialist magazine just opened up? And NBC did this advertisement for Jacobin. Do you think that happened by accident? Do you think that happened by accident? I mean, what's interesting is that, the DSA crowd generally stayed away from ideological Marxism. They would run articles about healthcare. They would run articles about the military budget being too big. They didn't run articles about Karl Marx. They didn't run articles about the Paris Commune. They didn't run articles about Mao Zedong thought and all of that. There's a hunger for it. The reason Jacobin came into existence, I'm convinced, is because millions and millions of young people were getting interested in actual Marxism. There was a hunger for knowledge about Lenin and Trotsky and Ho Chi Minh and the Communist Party of the 1930s. So it is, in my view, Jacobin emerged to fill that need by a group of people, the State Department socialists, the old DSA, Michael Harrington current. It's that current trying to fill that niche, right? There's a market for it. There's a desire to talk about the kind of things that we talk about on these lives. Every time I'm live, we talk about them. There's a hunger for it. So this was formed in a way that, it can give people, it can fulfill their desire. You can have articles about Trotsky and dialectical materialism and all of this, but you're not ever going to convince anybody to actually be an anti-imperialist or revolutionary. And it's always going to channel people into, vote for the Democrats, lobby for the Democrats, and spit on the socialist countries. They're all human rights violating regimes. That's the purpose that Jacobin serves. One interesting thing is that at the time Jacobin was started, very interesting, the ISO, the International Socialist Organization, right? The ISO, right? The Shachtmanite Trotskyists, right? People call them the Imperialism Supporters Organization. The ISO was still around, right? And the ISO, you'll notice, 2 years ago, it collapsed. It dissolved. Where are all of the ISO members now? They're all in DSA. And they're writing for Jacobin. And Haymarket Books, which was their publishing house, is still doing stuff with Jacobin. So the ISO, the old ISO, is in Jacobin. I got to tell you, Jacobin, its political orientation, it's basically like halfway. It's halfway between a Bernie-crat and a Trotskyite. You have your typical Bernie-crat, Rachel Maddow fan, money out of politics, Citizens United is bad, money is not speech, tax the rich, your typical Bernie-crat. You got your just liberal Bernie-crat. And then you've got your, ideological Trotskyite. The true teachings of Lenin and Trotsky were betrayed by evil Stalin. But if only, the ideological, true Trotskyist interpretation of the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 were applied, then I could actually support a socialist country. But only the pure revolution. So it's like you got, it's like a mixture. You're just plain liberal Bernie-crat folks on the one side, and you've got ideological, Trotskyites on the other side. That's Jacobin. It is a weird mixture of sectarian, ideological Trotskyites on the one hand, and liberal social democracy on the other. And it gets on my nerves, honestly. And I've seen the way that they operate, and I've seen how they just attack anyone who's actually getting anything done, they attack. I wanted to mention also that that one weird thing about the Jacobin crowd, not Jacobin so much itself, but the Jacobin crowd, you'll notice this, BreadTube, Jacobin, one weird thing about them is that they obsess with World War II. Everyone is a fascist, right? They've got, I think, ContraPoints has this video, how to spot a fascist. If he walks in a certain way, he just might be a fascist. If he walks this other way, he might be a fascist. If he wears his hair in a certain way, he might be a fascist. And it's this whole like silly like witch hunt, right? I think it's pretty clear who the fascists are. You know, people that want to kill all the immigrants and deport them, fascists. People that want a brutal police state, blue lives matter, police brutality is made up to oppress white cops, fascists, right? It's pretty clear who the actual fascists are. But they create this atmosphere in left-wing circles, right? Where it's like, wow, somebody doesn't agree with violently overthrowing the Syrian government. I bet he's a fascist. Bum, bum, bum. Right? This person disagreed with some position taken by the transgender activist movement. He can't just be wrong. He's got to be a fascist. Bum, bum, bum. And it's like they've created this atmosphere where in order to be a real socialist, in their minds, not only do you have to agree with them and hate all existing socialism, but you have to be constantly pointing at everyone who doesn't agree with your weird reformist viewpoint and go, oh, you're a fascist. You're a fascist. No, you're a fascist. You're a fascist. It's the most stupid thing. Another thing. Jacobin sets up these debates. Oh God. Oh God, I wish they wouldn't do this. It's better that they not do this than do this, right? Sometimes, you say things like, hey, Caleb, Jacobin might be bad, but it's a gateway drug, right? People can read Jacobin, then later they can listen to you. Sometimes, okay? But they set up these debates with Reason Magazine, okay? Reason Magazine. And Reason Magazine, libertarian magazine, Juche Self-Reliance, Reason Magazine will get out there and they'll do standard anti-communism. Just basic standard stuff, right? Communism failed everywhere it's ever been tried. It's killed a gamillion people and blah, 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 blah. Jacobin, they come out and they say, that's all true, but we're against state socialism too. We're the real libertarians. Socialism just means that you and all your friends get your money together and you start a pencil factory. And you share the pencils and the profits from the pencils you share, and there's no government involved. So if you're a libertarian, you should be a socialist too. It's a lot of fun. We can be like libertarian socialists. Let's have a fun, happy socialist party together, guys. And Jacobin does that. And so then, and then they come back. We would never want to be that. Socialism involves mass death and torture and killing. That's all true, but we're the nice kind, guys. Give us a chance. It's like embarrassing. It's painful, right? I mean, people go to this debate, people that, might be interested in libertarianism, might be interested in socialism, and they sit there and they hear actual socialists repeat and affirm every anti-communist lie, right? And sit there and try to say that the libertarian, neoliberal, free market, privatize everything, austerity agenda is compatible with socialism. That if you're a true socialist, you'll have no problem with Milton Friedman. If you're a true socialist, you'll have no problem with Alan Greenspan and Ayn Rand and Friedrich von Hayek and all of that, because socialism doesn't want the government to do anything. They actually try to convince libertarians that their beliefs are not the opposite of what we want. The people cutting social spending, busting unions, privatizing government services. The Jacobin crowd goes before them and goes, let us open a pencil factory. I mean, it's sickening, right? I mean, there is a disgusting libertarian agenda right now. I mean, look at what they've done. Privatizing things, driving people into poverty, destroying communities, millions of people without health. And the Jacobin crowd thinks that is compatible with socialism, because socialism is when a bunch of rich kids open a pencil factory together and share everything. And I mean, it's sickening. It is absolutely sickening, right? I mean, I watched a debate where the Jacobin guy, the editor of Jacobin, he's there. And, of course, the anti-communists, they're on their game. They know what they're about. We've all heard their arguments. They get up there, why do so many people flee from socialist countries? And he says, well, people flee from capitalist countries to other capitalist countries too. I mean, my family went from India to the United States, and, people just leave countries sometimes. I mean, No. How about the fact there's millions of people fleeing free market libertarian policies that have destroyed Central America? How about there's millions of people fleeing from the ugly wars that U.S. imperialism has created? How about the fact that people aren't fleeing from Cuba? Yeah, how about the fact that Libya, when it was a socialist country under Gaddafi, people were trying to get in because of all the benefits and trying to get in. Meanwhile, now that Libya has been bombed and destroyed into the free market, now people are trying to flee and get out, right? How about the fact that the crisis of mass migration is caused by free market policies? No, no, I mean, people from capitalist countries, they move to other capitalist countries. So, you're kind of right. Yeah, I mean, the Berlin Wall was not good, man. Yeah, it's cool. No wonder these people are on CNN all the time. I told you all I was going to tell you about this. I have been on CNN a total of one time. I cannot find the video. The transcript is on the CNN website. If you go to Google, type in Caleb Maupin CNN, you can see the transcript. But I have never been able to find the video. At the time, someone sent me a photo of it, and I haven't been able to even find the photo, like a screenshot, basically. But I was on CNN a total of one time. One time I was on CNN. This is what happened. It was in 2013 I was on CNN. The transcript is on the CNN website. No, it was not a vox pop because I was a guest. I was representing the International Action Center. And on the transcript it says, Caleb Maupin, International Action Center. I, Caleb Maupin, on 2013, I was invited to appear on CNN. So I'm standing there. We're in Times Square, and the CNN news crew. Obama is talking about sending cruise missiles to Syria, and they said to me, why are you opposed to the bombing of Syria? And I said, basically, I'm not word for word. You can read the actual transcript on CNN's website. I said the last thing we need right now is a new war. Hospitals are closing, schools are closing. The government right now, water's not being properly purified. We don't need to waste money on a new war. Every one of these missiles could pay for the salary of like 10 teachers. I just gave a basic economic answer. And I said, and also these rebels that the U.S. government is supporting and arming are doing lots of bad things. They're killing people. They're killing children. They're going into churches and killing people. And I said on the airwaves to millions of people, I said, look at what these rebels that the U.S. government is doing. Look at what they're actually doing. And they're interviewing me, the CNN crew. And they're standing there, and then they cut away. And the whole crew, I mean, it's CNN, it's never just like a reporter and a cameraman. It's like a reporter and a cameraman and a mic guy and like 10 security guys to make sure no one, they're all standing there going, it's like they were afraid they were going to lose their jobs because they had let me say that on the air. I swear, they had been so friendly to me. Okay, we just need you to come on here, talk about why you're protesting the war in Syria. The reporter, everybody was just like, oh, shit. Oh, shit. I swear, they had given them a list of things that you never talk about on the air. One of those things was the U.S. government funding terrorists in Syria. And I said it on national television. And they were standing there like, oh, shit. Oh, shit. They were about to shit themselves because I said that on television. And you'll notice that the video is nowhere. You cannot find the video. You can find the transcript on CNN.com. You cannot find the video anywhere, right? So there's a reason that I've never been on CNN again, because I said that, right? I used my time. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Mike is an old friend, guys. Got to give a lot of love to Mike Martinez. Great guy. And they were like ready to shit themselves, right? So, I mean, it's like CNN, they made a big mistake in their minds. I thought I was just saying what I would have said to anybody, right? I would have said that to anybody. If someone on the street asked me why I was protesting, I would have said the same thing. If I'd been on the radio, I would have said that. If I'd have been anywhere, you put a microphone in my face, ask me why I'm opposed to the bombing of Syria, that's the answer I'm going to give you. But they were like, they were terrified. Right? That is not allowed on CNN. So it's interesting that the go-to socialist of CNN is the editor of Jacobin. Right? Right? It's classic. Whenever they're doing a story about anything related to socialism, they have the editor of Jacobin on. Because you know what? He doesn't say shit like I say. He doesn't say that kind of thing. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't, right? It's funny. Look at how many times this Jacobin guy goes on there on CNN, right? And he's on there and he's all like, oh boy, socialism, don't worry, I'm just telling you, right? I mean, this sounds like crazy, you have to see this for yourself, right? Mao Zedong said the way to know what a pear is like is to bite into it, right? Sometimes you have to see things for yourself, right? And I'm telling you that, hey, like I said, I would join DSA if I could. I go to GSA events, I shake hands, I'm friendly. People are nasty to me, that's their problem. But, most people at DSA events are friendly and open. I would join the DSA if I could, right? But I'm just telling you, this is, State Department socialism, that whole deal. This is a very real thing, right? And the fact that now, Jimmy Dore ain't talking about Syria. Jimmy Dore is not talking about Libya. Jimmy Dore is not talking about anything other than, hey, why don't you stand up to Nancy Pelosi, and force her to actually address the issue of Medicare for all during a pandemic, for Christ's sakes. And the Jacobin crowd is, attacking Jimmy Dore over that, right? That's how much shills they really are. That is how much of a shill organization they really are. So, just keep that in mind, right? That, the State Department socialists, Jabba the Vosh, and there's a lot of them now, BreadTube and all of that. This is because there is a subterranean fire that is brewing, right? Average working class Americans are sick and tired of free market capitalism. They're sick and tired of their jobs and their homes and their communities being sold down the river to big corporations and big international bankers. They're tired of it. They are very, 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 very tired of it. They are very tired of it. And they're going to fight back. And it's only a matter of time. And it's already happening. The fight back is already happening. Something like, there's a good friend of mine I talked to today. Shout out to you. You know who you are. Longtime guy, goes back to Occupy Wall Street. He said something like the yellow vests is going to happen today. And he's right. It's going to happen pretty soon. There's going to be an American yellow vests movement pretty soon. It won't be because Caleb started it. No. It won't be because, this guy I was talking to started. It's happening. It's going to happen. There's going to be an American yellow vest anti-austerity movement pretty soon. The question is, can it lead to something good? Can it lead to a new society, or is it just going to degenerate into further balkanization and confusion and division, right? Is something good going to happen when the American people finally can't take it anymore and start getting more and more rowdy, right? Because Joe Biden ain't going to come in here and resolve the crisis. He certainly ain't going to do that. So, folks, I'm just telling you, right? The work that we do on here, you might think, hey, we just get on here and stream and talk politics. We are doing really important stuff here. We are doing really, really important stuff. So I just want to end on just a little, before I end my opening remarks, I just want to end with like a little kind of funny thing. So every so often, I will get into it with one of these Jacobinites or one of these bread tubers, and they will start criticizing me, and they'll be like, yeah, well, your dad is, and I'll be like, what? Or they'll be like, yeah, well, your dad, black, and they're talking about my father, right? And that's interesting to me because they know nothing about me, right? They don't know who my father is. But I have deduced by asking around, apparently, Thought Slime and, did I just say his name? We call him Skippy the Bear. These people, Skippy the Bear, Jabba the Vosh, they have developed a theory about my father. And, folks, folks, my father, yes, I want these people to find out who my father actually is. Right? I guess the story they have is that my dad is a Wall Street banker. Okay? My dad is a Wall Street banker. Okay? Folks, I'm not going to tell them who my father... It's not that hard to figure out who my father is. It's really not that hard to figure out who my father is, what he did for a living. I'm not going to talk to you all about it. You all can, but I really want them to dig, right? Right? Don't let Jabba the Vosh and Thought Slime and all of that tell you a funny story. Make them actually dig into who my father actually is. I think that's amusing, right? And I love it when they make it about me, right? It shouldn't be about me, right? It shouldn't be about me, right? It should be about politics. But seriously though, right? If these people are really interested, if they've decided that I'm the way I am because of my dad, and my dad is a big Wall Street banker, look into who my dad actually is, right? Because it is definitely not what these people think it is, and it's going to be a pretty big disappointment when they dig it up. I want these people to dig into who my dad actually is, because my dad is nothing like what they expect. So yeah, I just find that to be really amusing. I don't talk about family issues on here. I don't, I might tell a little anecdote here or there, but I don't, but yeah, this is interesting, right? My dad's a big Wall Street guy, really. Yeah, my dad is what is he? I mean, this is really funny stuff. So yeah, I want to kind of see what they develop, right? Or I'm curious, like, maybe if they figure out who my dad actually is, they can come up with some kind of narrative that, like, explains why I do what I do. That'll be amusing. That one I'm curious about, right? So how am I on here doing doing what I do because of who my dad is? That I want to hear. I'm fascinated by all of this. These people, they seem to know a lot about, who I am, and they know nothing. They really, really know nothing. It's really funny. So I'm curious to see how far they go with this, right? They apparently have a narrative they've developed to explain away why I'm no good. They have a personal narrative about me that includes my father, and it seems to be way, way off. But I want to see what they come up with, right? Maybe people will look into who my dad actually is, right? Maybe they'll figure out who my dad actually is. Maybe based on that, they'll try to come up with some kind of narrative where I fit into all of it. But anyway, enough about that, right? I just found that to be very amusing, that they have made up this whole story that has nothing to do with who I am. And if they actually looked into it, it's not that hard to figure out who my father is and what he does. And I mean, it's not that hard. And it's pretty different than what they seem to think. So, based on that, folks, I must say I'm amused. Social media can be an amusing thing. Someone said Caleb's father is Barack Obama, which makes him part Kenyan. That's good. That's good. Caleb's dad is Xi Jinping. Nope. Right? I'm curious. This is great, right? I want to hear more about the narrative about how I became the evil lord of the tankies. Let's see what they come up with. Maybe they have a dark, scary story. I'm really amused. I really want to see what they come up with, right? Make it about me. Please make it all about me. Make it personal, right? Write a lengthy article about my life story, where I came from, how I became what I am, right? There's actually a website that did that, or tried to do it. They didn't get into my relatives. They got into my life story. They did some research. There's an anti-communist website called Useful Stooges, and they did like a 4-part series of articles about me. And that was certainly amusing. And they got a lot of things right. Actually, they did their homework. It's a biographical piece about Caleb Maupin or whatever, right? And it's like 4 parts, and there's a lot of things in there that are right. It won't tell you who my father is, but it's fun. I mean, it's fun. Hey, I love to learn about myself. So there you go. Fun times. All right, folks. Fun times. Fun times. So, folks, let's do names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. I will call you out. Your dad is Qasem Soleimani. Right. Names and locations. I'll call you out as I see you. Long Island, New York. Henderson, Nevada. Wilmington, Delaware. Union, New Jersey. Rob from Melbourne. Max the Sax, Virginia. Vosh, Houston, David, Italy, Bristol, Wisconsin, Los Angeles, Washington State, Billings, Montana, Texas, California, Missouri, Northern California, Detroit, PA, Pennsylvania, George, New York City, your dad's house, right? Washington State, Nassau County, Cincinnati, Ohio, Illinois, Washington, Whidbey Island, Rapid City, San Diego, Las Vegas, Alberta, Canada, Kangaroo, Michigan, Turlock, California, Northern Nevada, Lyle from China, Michigan, Maryland, Boston, Coruscant, Malling, Connecticut, Piney Woods, Bulgaria, Washington State, Brisbane, Australia, North Carolina, Chan, Georgia, Langley, Virginia, Nowhere Particular, Armistead, Atlantic Ocean, Kingston, Ontario, Auckland, New Zealand, Endor, Illinois, Dan, Very good. Brian Schaefer in Illinois. The soft underbelly of the empire, Brazil. Baltimore, Maryland. Very good. Cleveland, Pirate Alex. Shaniqua from Buffalo, New York, Wall Street. Very good. Caleb's dad is Pol Pot. Uruguay. Kieran from San Diego. Stalin's grave. Under your bed. Ha ha ha. Right? Fairhope, Alabama. Illinois. Sham, Cleveland Wasteland. Hello, says Bill from the United States. Houston. Houston, right? Caleb's dad is Michael. This is great. This is great. Keep it coming, folks. This is great. Let's see which ones they like decide. Caleb's dad is John Bolton. Look it up. There you go, right? Chicago. All righty. Home is wherever I am at the time. Oh, that's sweet. Bellingham, West Virginia, or Washington. South Africa. Four Oaks, North Carolina. Caleb Maupin Sr., undisclosed location. Bum, bum, bum. All right. Bolton, Emperor Palpatine, Enver Hoxha, John Bolton, right? Are we done with names and locations? Now we're just seeing the funny things. All right. All righty, folks. Names. Any more names and locations before we go? Bulgaria. Alex, welcome. Welcome. Good evening. Very good. Grove, North Carolina. George Galloway. Oh, that's another name. Like names and locations, folks. Rensselaer, New York. Very good. The Netherlands. Very good. Very, very good. Joanne is in the Netherlands. Belarus. That's good. Right. St. David's, Bermuda. Very good. Very, very good. Who else is with us tonight? Who else is with us tonight? Queens, New York City, Lloyd Bennett. Very good. Very, very good. And for those of you who have joined us along the way, Eureka, Illinois, Dunn, North Carolina, Pencil Factory, New York, Ukraine, Wasteland, Montana, says Mikey Schilling, New Zealand. Wow. Very good. Albany, New York, Canada. Very good. Coal mines of West Virginia. Betvoir County. Alrighty. Asheville, North Carolina. Very good. Very good. Lincolnite Cheers, Yagoda. Okay. Very good. All right, folks. So we do have a number of super chats to get through. So I will just start naming them. And like I said, keep the super chats rolling in. The longer you keep the super chats rolling, the more I keep answering them. So, some of these will get a longer answer than others, obviously. ML YouTube channels. Finnish Bolshevik, that's a great channel. Finnish Bolshevik. Luna Oi, she's great. Luna is great. A woman from Vietnam, does a great YouTube channel. Who else? Who else is great? Jason Unruhe, don't always agree with a lot of his stuff, but he has some good videos on Marxist economics and refuting stuff about North Korea, and he does good work. There's good people out there. Look, there's a lot of good folks out there who do a lot of good YouTube work, right? I like Bay Area 415 and the work he's done on China. I like some of Hakim's stuff. There's a lot of good people doing good content out there, right? We don't all always agree with each other, but that's okay. People make their contributions. So there you go. So progressive pro-imperialism. Yeah, that seems to be the role that the Jacobin crowd and the State Department socialists play. They frame supporting imperialism as a progressive thing, right? Whoever the CIA is attacking, they put it in lefty clothing. That seems to be a big part of what they do. And I think that's I went over it when I talked about State Department socialists and Harrington and their roots and all of that. I think that we pretty much beat that horse into the ground. You can talk about, there's other history there, right? For example, J. Lovestone. Do people know the name J. Lovestone? Right? So in the Communist Party, you'll remember in the 20s, there were two major factions. State capitalism. Very good question. There were two factions. There was the William Z. Foster faction, and there was the faction led by J. Lovestone, right? And the Trotskyites had been part of the William Z. Foster faction. They got kicked out. So then, in 1928, the Soviet Union and the Communist International had the Sixth World Congress of the Communist International. And at the Sixth World Congress, they changed their position, and they reoriented toward opposing the Social Democrats. And in the United States, there was a faction in the Communist Party USA that did not agree with opposing social democracy and the new orientation of the Communist International. And so they were kicked out. They said it didn't apply. The USA was the exception to Marx's law. Um, and they were called the American Exceptionalists. They were led by J. Lovestone, right? That's actually where the term American Exceptionalism comes from. And based on that, the Lovestonites, for a while, they had their own group, followers of J. Lovestone, that was called the Communist Party Opposition. And they were in the labor movement, and they kind of worked against the Communist Party. They had a newspaper called The Workers' Age and such. They were led by J. Lovestone. After the Second World War, they joined up with the CIA, and J. Lovestone organized the CIA's trade union work. They set up the International Federation of Free Trade Unions, which was an anti-communist trade union federation run by the CIA. And it was, and that was J. Lovestone. And probably the biggest thing J. Lovestone ever did was the Solidarność movement in Poland. So that's J. Lovestone. Max Shachtman, right? I talked about the Shachtmanites. That's a wing of Trotskyism that broke with Trotsky, and then that's where Michael Harrington and Irving Howe and Irving Kristol, that's where they all come out of, and they all, so the labor bureaucracy, the CIA, this is where that State Department socialist trend comes from. All right. Problems with the U.S. school system. Well, I mean, it's actually interesting. So a lot of people will admit, and a lot of people know, that the leading educational scholar in the United States, right? Jonathan Kozol. Do people know Jonathan Kozol? He is the most respected scholar of educational theory in the United States, by far. This guy, you go to any academic institution and you talk about educational theory, this guy's name is it's like talking about, Christ or something, right? Jonathan Kozol is a Marxist-Leninist. And actually, he wrote a book going into great detail about Cuba's educational system and their achievements. It's called Children of the Revolution. Read it. The most respected scholar in the field of educational theory. He wrote The Shame of the Nation, criticizing the U.S. educational system. Is a tanky, right? Jonathan Kozol is a tanky. Read his book about Cuba and their huge achievements in education. It was published in the 1970s, but it's still available. You can get it. Jonathan Kozol was a tanky, and he was a huge critic of American education. And his writings, The Shame of a Nation, he's made documentary. Our educational system in the United States is horrendous, right? It is a disgrace. It is compared to the rest of the Western world, it's an embarrassment, right? I mean, the rate of functioning illiteracy in the United States, people who can kind of learn to read, but they can't really read, right? I mean, it's a tragedy. And you probably know people like this in your life, that they can read signs, right? They can read signs, they can read, Facebook posts, but you give them a book and they go, and that's not their fault, right? That's not like that they're stupid. And there's probably people watching this who maybe that's and they feel a huge amount of shame right now, right? As I'm saying this to them, right? They probably feel very ashamed. They said, oh my God, that's me. Well, no, it's not your fault, right? If you had a real education, if you had a proper education, you wouldn't feel that way when somebody handed you a book, all right? It's not your fault. It's American imperialism's fault. It's the fact that the bankers and billionaires who run this country would rather build tanks and bombs and guns than teach you to read in a way that made it so you could really read, right? There's a lot of people in the United States, a very big percentage of the population, that are functionally illiterate. They can read signs, they can read Facebook posts, they can read tweets, but they cannot read a book. Right? They don't have the right attention span. They don't process the information, and it's not their fault. It's not their fault. It is the fault of American education. They have not been taught how to properly read. It is sickening. It is absolutely sickening that this goes on, right? And these people feel shame for their whole lives. I'm a very literary person. You've seen the bookshelves behind me. I've written books, right? And I've been many people that I'll give a book to or whatever, and I can see they just get this look of fear when they get the book. That's a result of American education. That is a crime. What American education, I mean, it is atrocious. It is absolutely atrocious, right? I mean, our scores in math and science are really, really abysmal. I mean, so many fields, right? Like many people pointed out, Trump said that he was going to make Apple make their iPhones in the United States. Well, Bloomberg News ran a great article and they said, you know what? The American educational system doesn't churn out enough engineers and scientists to do that, right? If they wanted to move their iPhone factories here, it doesn't just take assembly line workers to make iPhones. You need engineers, you need technicians, and there aren't enough people in the United States with the proper degrees and training in engineering and mathematics to do that kind of thing. I mean, that's atrocious, right? I mean, we don't invest in our population here in the United States, right? They really have worked hard to dumb down our population, right? And there's some things. I mean, you look at some of the schools in low-income areas in the United States, right? And I think about, the school that I went to, for example. I mean, I went to elementary school in a much smaller, the first 4 years of my education, I went to an elementary school that was in a much smaller town than the one where I graduated from high school. The place I graduated from high school was a very small town, but I went to like the first 4 years of elementary, at a very small town. This town didn't even have its own school district. It actually shared its school district with another town. And there were like, there were some kids who ate. I remember sometimes the cafeteria wasn't available, and we would eat lunch at our desks, because we didn't have a cafeteria. So we'd eat lunch at our desks. We'd have our trays at our desks. And, 30 kids in a class. My fourth grade class had 32 kids in it. Right? I mean, hey, I think about that, right? And this is the American education system. And it's, there's many things you can talk about our educational system that is just horrific. And people talk about the school to prison pipeline. There's a lot of talk about that. There's a lot of talk about, the military. It seems like a lot of low-income schools, they're just military recruiting facilities, right? I mean, it's just, they're training kids to be in the military. Especially a lot of these charter schools are really tied in with the military. They run them in kind of a military way, and the kids are basically, it's almost militarized education. And it's, and a lot of these charter schools are even worse than the public schools in a lot of ways. They always highlight the ones that are good, right? The high-achieving charter schools are the ones that are on the front page to push for school choice and Betsy DeVos. But, a lot of these charter schools in low-income areas are actually probably worse than regular schools. So it's complicated. I mean, ultimately, what is needed is a government of action that will fight for working families and a complete change. I mean, we need to change the government's priorities, but we need a change in the system, right? I mean, we need a lot of things to change, but yeah, and how many decades of school choice have we had? Libertarians are always pushing this like it's the answer, right? Oh, if we just get the government out, if we get the free market involved, that'll solve everything. Bull honky. We've been doing that privatization, school choice since the 80s. We've been pushing this, and it's been getting worse and worse. The test scores have been going down. It's been getting worse and worse and worse. I swear. And these libertarians, they lie so much. For example, I remember in school, right? A lot of what I did when I was in high school was watch movies, right? But one of the movies I remember, one of my social studies teachers showed us John Stossel, right? And John Stossel had this series about America, are we really number one? And he was talking about how bad the education system in the United States was. And then he was like, see, look how good it is in France. Look how good it is in Germany. That means privatize everything. And I sat there and I raised my hand and I said, yeah, but in France, the government's more involved. And in Germany, the government's more involved. So why would school choice be the answer? These libertarians do that all the time, right? Oh, look, in Taiwan, so that means we should privatize everything. The government is heavily involved in the economy in Taiwan, right? Libertarians lie. Libertarianism, there's a lot of lying that goes on in the libertarian milieu. Just a lot of lying that goes on. So, don't doubt it. Don't doubt it. And no, I mean, it's like, yeah, the libertarian Betsy DeVos solution for education, just get the government out our back, school for profit. If that was going to work, things would be much better by now, isn't it? Alrighty. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. All right. The role of law enforcement in socialism. Look, obviously in socialism, there will be law enforcement institutions, but they will be new law enforcement institutions. That's that whole quote from Marx. We can't just take hold of the ready-made state machinery. Obviously new institutions will have to come into being, and a new police force with a new set of values and a new way of operating and a new way of relating to the communities will have to be created. No question about it, right? I don't like the slogan, abolish the police. The reason that I don't like the slogan, abolish the police, is because it is a slogan that doesn't make sense to average people, right? And especially when you say to people, okay, abolish the police. Now, it's midnight and there is a violent person breaking into my apartment. So what do I do? What do I do? And they say, oh, well, we'll have you call the Workers' Revolutionary Fight Back Community Assembly. And it's like, So it sounds to me like this Workers' Revolutionary Fight Back Community Assembly are a lot like police. So what you mean is you don't mean abolish the police. What you mean is have a new kind of police. And they're like, oh, no. But the Workers' Revolutionary Fight Back Committee, they're not the police. They're not the police, right? They're not the police. They're like, no. Obviously, in a socialist society, you're going to need new institutions with new values, with new ways of interacting with the community. But when you just say abolish the police, get rid of the police, to average working people, that sounds completely insane. It's not a real policy. Just like open borders is not a real policy, right? Ending the attacks on immigrant communities, full legalization, that's a real policy. Open borders is not a real policy, right? You need to, if you're going to present things to people that are not the full socialist program, or like transitional demands, are programmatic demands, they need to make sense. They need to be things people can imagine. You say, well, I think we should have a new kind of police force based in communities. Oh, okay. That makes sense. Abolish the police does not make any sense. People then, oh, what, they're going to have a society with no police? That doesn't make sense, right? Oh, we're going to have no borders? There won't be any passports? There won't be any customs or anything? That doesn't make any sense, right? If we're going to present policy solutions, they need to make sense. All right. Socialism and religion. Look, I think, here's the thing. Feudalism in Europe and all over the world. Feudalism is a system where religion is not an option. Religion is not optional in a feudal society, right? Feudal Europe, if you said anything critical of the Roman Catholic Church, if you said that, hey, I don't think the earth is the center of the universe, I think it revolves around the sun, you got burned at the stake and killed, okay? If you said, hey, I don't agree with what the Pope said, you got killed, right? In feudal Europe, religion was the absolute totalitarian mechanism through which the feudal order propped itself up. And the dawn of capitalism came with people rebelling against feudalism and breaking free from feudalism, and the triumph of reason and the scientific method and the Enlightenment, etc. So based on that, right, Marxists that emerged from, Marxism and socialism originally emerged from the faction, right? It was people that had participated in the bourgeois revolution who thought it didn't go far enough, right? And that's where, the society of the just and the conspiracy of equals and eventually Marxism and all of that, that's where all that came out of, right? And of course, it viewed religion in a very negative light, a very, very negative light. And it saw religion in a negative light because religion was an institution that upheld feudal institutions. And even though feudalism had been overturned, the Catholic Church and the Vatican still had a lot of power. A lot of countries still had a state religion. There was still a lot of, nationalism in the name of religion, etc. So it makes sense that the early Marxist movement was very, very anti-religious, right? You have to remember in Russia, for example, the Tsar, he was not simply the head of state. He was also the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, right? He was like the Pope and the king combined, right? And the Russian Orthodox Church was seen by the Bolsheviks as a brutal institution that was repressing people. So in the context of feudalism, people rising up to overthrow feudalism, people in Europe who participated in the overthrow of feudalism and are saying, hey, this capitalism isn't so much better. In that context, it makes sense. It makes absolute sense that religion would be the target, right? We all know Marx, religion is the opium of the people. It's the heart of a heartless world. It's the soul of soulless conditions, right? It makes perfect sense. Things have changed, right? Nowadays, religion is an option. right? There's a lot of people who grow up in an atheist household. There's a lot of people who grow up in a household that maybe their family's kind of religious, but they don't practice their religion. And religion is more of a personal matter. It's a personal choice. And people get involved in religious organizations because they want to, because they're looking for something. Often, working people get involved in religious communities because they need to, because they can't survive, right? And that's actually very important. You talk about in a lot of oppressed communities, especially in a lot of immigrant communities, the religious organizations, the churches, function as community centers that save people when people are in danger of losing their homes and such. The church is a family, it's a community they can be part of that holds them up. And the church pushes values that are contrary to the values of this society. The society is very much, you're in it for yourself, everyone for themselves, greed is good, selfishness is a virtue. Well, the church, Jesus Christ, and compassion and kindness, and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. These are values that enable people to build communities that hold oppressed communities together, that hold working people together, that give people a sense of community, that give people a purpose in life beyond selfishness. So the nature of religion in society has really, really changed. I mean, at this point, in public schools, for the most part, they don't even have religion in public schools. There is religious freedom to pretty much a lot of degree. There is religious freedom. So based on that, with the role of religion in society changing, right, I think that it's fair to say that the way Marxists should view religion should change as well, right? Why not? Right? Bolivarian socialism in Venezuela and Bolivia and Nicaragua, especially Nicaragua, is very religious, right? In Nicaragua, the actual slogan of the government is Christianity, socialism, and solidarity. That is the slogan of the government, right? It is a Christian socialist government in Nicaragua. In Bolivia, Evo Morales was Roman Catholic, but he also practiced indigenous religion. He had indigenous religious ceremonies that he practiced as a socialist leader. When he met with the Pope, he very famously gave the Pope, I'll never forget this, a crucifix with a hammer and sickle on it. Do folks remember that famous photo? When Pope Francis met Evo Morales gave the Pope a crucifix, hammer, and sickle. That was badass. That was a badass moment, right? That was a badass moment. Okay, and so based on that, I don't think I am a religious person, and I personally think that faith and socialism now can walk hand in hand. Now that faith is a matter of personal conscience. And for real it is, right? There's no imposition of religion. People can be atheists if they want to be atheists. People can be Buddhists if they want to be Buddhists. People can Google a new religion on the internet and read about it and convert to it. Based on that, I think that faith and socialism can walk hand in hand. However, my personal view, and I'll be very real about this, is that there should be no religious test for membership in a revolutionary organization. No one should ever start a revolutionary movement in the United States that is a Christian movement or a Muslim movement or a Jewish movement or a Buddhist movement or an atheist movement. In my view, the revolutionary organization should be based on people wanting to fight for socialism and people wanting to build a socialist society. And people's religion is between them and their God, between them and their faith community. And that religion, workers of all different faiths and religions should be able to join hands in hand in a revolutionary organization and fight for socialism. And that we will respect people's freedom of religion and freedom from religion. And religious workers should not be made uncomfortable. And non-religious workers should also not be made uncomfortable, right? That the revolutionary movement should be a place that all kinds of people, religious and secular, can work hand in hand for socialism. Okay? That is my belief. Okay, so Fort Hood shootings. I haven't followed that. I don't know enough about that. Leftist YouTubers. I already mentioned that, actually. The first one was tips for starting an ML YouTube channel. Oh, okay. So I'm sorry. So the person who asked the first question, right? So the leftist YouTubers got answered, but the first question that I got was actually, what tips for starting an ML YouTube channel? Do it. That's my tip. Do it. Do it. Start a YouTube channel, and get a camera, and film videos about what you want to talk about. Find topics that you think are interesting. Think about the videos that you like to watch. And based on those videos that you like to watch, make videos that you want to make, right? Make videos that you are someone who's interested in Marxism, so you make videos that are the kind that you would like to watch. That's what I would recommend. If there's kind of videos that you enjoy, that I do, make videos of your own that are kind of like that, right? That's a good way to do a lot of things, right? If you want to make art, right? If you like to read certain articles, write articles that are like those articles you want to read. That's generally a good line for anything, right? Always imagine that you are the viewer. Imagine that you are the viewer. Imagine that you are the reader, right? If you're writing something, imagine that you're reading it. If you're giving a speech, imagine that you're listening to it, right? You always want to try your hardest to be in the mind of your audience. You can't always do that, though. Whatever. What would have to redeem Vosh the Hutt? Well, it's Jabba the Vosh, mind you. It is not Vosh the Hutt. It's Jabba the Vosh. Come on now. Come on. It's Jabba the Vosh. And in order for him to redeem himself, how about, he apologize for comparing anyone who defends the Soviet Union and comparing tankies to Nazis. How about that? How about he apologize for equating the people who tore down the walls of Auschwitz concentration camp with the people who built it? That might be a nice place to start. There you go. Alrighty. So someone just said, I'm just going to address this now. Someone said Jacobins refers to the Black Jacobins of Haiti. No, it doesn't, because the only reason they're called Black Jacobins is because that's a book. That's a book by C.L.R. James, and he's calling them that in order to make a point. They weren't actually called that, so no, it's not. That's a book by C.L.R. James about the Haitian Revolution. It's a very good book, but the Haitians were not actually called Black Jacobins. That's C.L.R. James' name he gave them, so no, that's not true. All right. And that's why do you think they have the guillotine art? Give me a break. Okay. DSA gets money from the Jewish Communal Fund also. Well, surprise, surprise. That seems to be an entity that that's one group that is funding left-wing activism in the United States. Surprise, surprise, right? All right. Was the People's Republic of China's one-child policy Malthusianism? I don't think so. I think it was related to some specific things going on in China, and I think it's been gotten rid of, but I don't want to speak for them, and I'll have to actually do some research. I want to give you a real answer. I don't want to just speculate off the top of my head, so I'll have to look into that. Socialism is the solution to automation. Of course it is. In a rational society, technological advances would be a good thing, right? There's more machines, there's less work for everyone to do. But in capitalism, where the worker can only work so long as he sells his labor to a boss, machines result in poverty. Abundance creates poverty. The more stuff that's created, the more efficiency there is in production, the greater poverty there is because of capitalism. But if the means of production, if the banks, factories, and major industries were organized to serve public good and not profits, this contradiction would no longer exist. This is what socialism is all about. Right? This is Frederick Engels, Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. This is what socialism is all about. Socialism gets rid of the contradiction of capitalism. Under capitalism, the more efficient technology becomes, the more poverty there is, right? Under socialism, when you have a planned economy, the standard of living can just continue to rise. There is no longer a contradiction between technology and social living standards, right? As technology goes up, social living conditions go up. Socialism gets rid of that contradiction where abundance creates poverty. That's socialism. That is Marxism. Marxism is all about technology. Folks, I know you all want the Synthetic Left book. That book, I can't do it wrong. I have to do it right. I'm going to put out a very short book about Silicon Valley. That's the next thing on the docket. And I'm working on it already, and, about Silicon Valley, and I'm going to talk about Marxism and technology, because it needs to be discussed. Alrighty. Noam Chomsky, he's great. Noam Chomsky's great in some ways. I don't agree with him in other ways. In some ways, he disappoints me. You've seen my interaction with Noam. He kind of disappointed me in that interaction. He answered the question that I asked him at the United Nations with the 4 Ds of dodgeball: dodge, dip, duck, and dodge. And he can be like that sometimes, but he's made his contribution, and, he's a left-wing intellectual, and, especially you watch his stuff during the Cold War, especially his stuff about Latin America, about Nicaragua, he's on point, right? Now, when he talks about Syria and some other stuff, he's not on point. But there you go. Noam is Noam Chomsky. And some of the stuff he says about the Tea Party, very on point. His criticism of Antifa, very on point. Sometimes I agree with what he says, sometimes I don't. Leftists in the GOP. Yeah, I mean, I'm noticing that. The Democrats are more and more becoming the mainstream party. They're becoming the party of mainstream views, right? They are becoming the party of urban professionals and the mainstream viewpoint. And the Democrats, Donald Trump and his working class demagogy. It's possible there could be a big realignment in the works for sure, and we'll just have to see, right? We'll see how these things go. I mean, there's a lot of we are entering a period where the kind of things we're talking about are going to be very, 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 very important. Um, Alrighty. Nazi economics. Well, the Nazi economist was Holomer Horace Greeley Schacht, right? He was the economist of Nazi Germany. And the Nazis seized power and they took some very dramatic economic moves. They built the Autobahns highways. The Nazis restarted military spending. The Nazis refused to pay back loans. Thank you, Frank, for your super chat. They refused to pay back their loans to American and British banks, and they ended the war reparations that they ripped up the Treaty of Versailles. And they also put a whole bunch of workers in concentration camps. And they built a whole concentration camp system. And, the Nazi economy, it was a capitalist economy. There were all kinds of private corporations. But private corporations, like Volkswagen, got free labor from concentration camp prisoners. The military spending was a big part of it. Military spending was a big part of it. I believe, Tony Benn, who was a very important British leftist, he said that Hitler, saved the German economy by putting half the country in prison camps and the other half in prison uniforms or in military uniforms. And that's about right. I mean, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but I mean, yeah, if you restart military spending, plus you build a huge, police state repression apparatus, you build some big highways, and you do it really dramatically, right? When the Nazis took power, they took power very, very dramatically. It was very quickly, and then boom, 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 all these big economic moves, you jumpstart the economy. And that's what they did. They jump-started the economy, and that's how they were able to stay in power. Now, the reason World War II broke out is because it only lasted for so long. These kind of Bonapartist Keynesian maneuvers only work for so long, right? So, right, Marxism talks about the problem of overproduction, the need for a state-run economy. And that's all well and good, right? That's Marxism. But if you're a capitalist, obviously you don't want the working class to seize control of the means of production. But if you're a capitalist and you see, economic problems, there's, what do? Well, John Maynard Keynes. Do you know the name John Maynard Keynes? Well, John Maynard Keynes was a British economist, and he said, well, Marx was all wrong. The problem wasn't overproduction, it was underconsumption, right? Marx, overproduction, what an idiot. It's underconsumption, you doof. That's, whatever. John Maynard Keynes, British economist. John Maynard Keynes, his theory was that, was that we need the government to spend money in order to stimulate the economy. And, the classic, what people always talk about Keynesian economics is they say, the government hires a guy to go dig a hole. Then it hires another guy to go dig the hole back in. Well, that's a tremendous waste, isn't it? No, because both of those guys got a wage. Then they could go spend that money. That's a stimulus to the economy. Ditch digging. Right? And John Maynard Keynes, he doesn't say much about what you should build. He doesn't care what you build, right? It's just, the government has to spend money in order to keep capitalism, from having a crisis of underconsumption. That's Keynesian economics, right? However, right, so then the question becomes, what do you build? Right? Now, in the United States, we actually have a whole tradition of, you can go back to Alexander Hamilton, right? Alexander Hamilton, he believed the government should spend money, and he was all about a national bank, and he had the U.S. government build lighthouses, right? The idea was building infrastructure stimulates the economy. And there was a figure who was a big supporter of Abraham Lincoln, Henry Carey. and he actually wrote an entire pamphlet opposing slavery and talking about how there is the British economic system, which is about globalism and controlling trade routes, and there's the American system, which is about, scientific research and the government building, infrastructure. Right? And you can talk about, Roosevelt, he was Keynesian in the sense he had the government spend things, but he had the government build hospitals and schools and libraries and highways and airports and build things that could be a long-term stimulus to the economy, right? And, not just having people dig ditches, but actually having people build constructive things. Schacht was very different than Roosevelt. Holomer Horace Greeley Schacht, the Nazi economist, he was all about military spending and prison, mechanisms of repression spending, right? His idea was if we're going to have the government spend money in order to fix the economy, we should have the government spend money on brutal repression in prisons, and we should have the government spend money on the military. He was not about building schools and hospitals and universities. I mean, he did some of that, but he didn't like that. He called that ditch digging. He was against ditch digging. He was all about the government spending money on the military, spending money on prisons. And in a lot of ways, the U.S. economy, right, the prison industrial complex that developed in the 80s, the military industrial complex that emerged after the Second World War, these are gradual implementations of the Schachtian Nazi economic policies. And I've talked about that many times. And it's important to note, Nazi economics, it's a real thing. All righty, statement on Biden's statement. He sure coughed a lot, didn't he? A lot of coughing going on there, right? A lot of coughing, which party should I join? None of them. None of them. At this point, I would not join any of the parties. I would urge you to get involved with the Center for Political Innovation. Naxals versus Nazguls, all right. I would urge you to get involved with the Center for Political Innovation, but maybe join the DSA so you can meet people. Maybe, I know some good folks in the Communist Party. I know some, folks in various groups that are happy. But at the end of the day, I would urge you to join the Center for Political Innovation, an independent Marxist think tank, British Empire and Socialism in Britain. An independent Marxist think tank, that's really trying to get things done. All righty. All right. But there you go. CPI, Center for Political Innovation. Home ownership under socialism. Yeah, people should own their own homes. Socialists are not opposed to personal property. They're not opposed to personal property. They are opposed to private property, right? In fact, the rate of home ownership in China is far higher than the rate of home ownership in the United States right now. Cuba, if you live in the house for so long, you own it, right? So, there you go. I mean, home ownership, people owning the house in which they live, not having to rent, that's a good thing. And socialist countries generally have a very high rate of home ownership. Right now, the family home is falling apart in American society. It's becoming a thing of the past. Banks, people rent their homes from banks. It's a disaster. 89.7% of workers are not in a union, right? Well, the labor bureaucracy needs to stop giving money to the Democratic Party, right? And start actually organizing, right? There was this whole campaign, $15 an hour for fast food workers. And a lot of what they did was just campaign for the Democrats. I went to some of these rallies and the workers in the McDonald's, didn't actually know there was a strike going on. It wasn't a strike. It was just a big Democratic Party rally outside of the McDonald's, right? That, there was all this, they were doing this, fast food forward, 15 an hour and all that, but they weren't actually like organizing any McDonald's workers to go on strike. They were just having these rallies where Democrats spoke, and a lot of what the labor bureaucracy does is just shill for the Democrats, right? I mean, let's be real about this. It's a fact, right? A lot of what the labor union bosses do is just shill for the Democrats, stage rallies for the Democrats, kiss ass to the Democrats. They don't actually do a lot of organizing. Now, there are exceptions. There are some great campaigns, but a lot of what the labor bureaucracy spends the hard-earned dues of members on is shilling to the Democrats, right? Actual organizing, right? They don't organize Walmart. They don't organize Kmart. And there needs to be a shift in the labor bureaucracy. If they're ever going to expand the influence of organized labor in the United States, they need to actually organize instead of just, being the Democratic Party's loyal source of propaganda and funds and such. I mean, the labor bureaucracy has just kind of become the Democratic Party. I mean, it's one thing to vote for the Democrats, okay? Um, you know, uh, eh, you know, um, it's one thing to vote for the Democrats, right? But it's another thing to just, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. So, I mean, I'm glad to see, a lot of the unions lined up behind Bernie Sanders rather than, behind the mainstream Democrat. That's something at least, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, the way the unions were built was not through, I mean, the way that the steel mills were organized, the way that the auto plants were organized. It used to be that the auto workers and the steel workers and the textile workers and the meat packers, they used to make about what fast food workers make now. In the 1920s and 30s, people who worked in industry were starving, and they made poverty wages, right? They were deeply impoverished. Well, that changed. It wasn't until there was a huge labor movement led by William Z. Foster and Gus Hall and people like that were very militant and very radical. It wasn't until that you actually got. They talk about these good paying jobs. It was so annoying. I listened to Steve Bannon gave this talk. He's like, oh, Burger King, that's not a good paying job. We need steel jobs. Steel jobs used to pay about the same as what Burger King paid. It wasn't until William Z. Foster and Gus Hall and the United Steelworkers and the Steelworkers Organizing Committee came along that steelworkers started getting paid decent wages. Read about the 1919 steel strike. Read about the Little Steel Strike of 1939. Read about the Memorial Day Massacre. No, there was a time where if you were a steelworker, you made what somebody makes at Burger King. But then there was struggle. And why shouldn't somebody who works at Burger King get paid a decent wage? Why shouldn't somebody who works at Burger King get enough to, feed their wife and kids, right? Why not? Why not? What is special? Wait, what is special, right? What is special about it? Right? I mean, seriously, right? I mean, I have worked in fast food before. I've worked at gas stations before. That is hard work. That is miserable work. Why shouldn't, someone have the protection of a union contract? Why not? Why not, right? Why do we assume, right? Why do we assume that if somebody works at if they work at CVS Pharmacy or they work at a bank that they shouldn't have labor protections on the job, right? I think they should. Why shouldn't the service sector be protected? Why not? Why not? Why not? Why not? Okay, and let's remember until the labor movement came along and organized these workers, people did make freaking low wages at these jobs. So there you go. Okie dokie. All right. The biggest change of opinion I've had in my life. Well, that's interesting. The biggest change of opinion, right? I mean, I will say I guess I don't know about the biggest change of opinion I've had in my whole life, okay? But the biggest change of opinion that I've had as a Marxist was in the summer of 2010. I was done with college. I was living in Cleveland, and I was very, very desperate. I did not have very much money. And I was doing a lot of activism around the issue of police brutality. You can actually read Cleveland Scene magazine did like a feature article about me in 2010. Me and my roommate, we were doing a lot of activism. And, I was very, very desperate for, I didn't have very much money. I kept getting like little jobs at gas stations and losing them, and it was not a good time. But I did a lot of reading, and I studied. I really studied at that point. I studied William Z. Foster's, History of the Three Internationals. I read Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific for the second time. I read Marx, and I read Capital, and I just studied extensively. And that time I did nothing. I went to rallies, and I studied, and I went to rallies, and I studied, and I went to the gas station jobs, and I got fired from the gas station jobs, and I went to protests, and I studied. And during that time, I started to think like a Marxist, right? I had thought of Marxism as a religion prior to that. I mean, I wouldn't have said that. I would have said, if you'd asked me, I would have said, Marxism is scientific, but I still thought of Marxism in a religious sense. I thought of Marxism as, hey, we have this magical formula for making the ideal world. People will just say our magical Marxist words. And I really had an idealist understanding of Marxism. But when I studied Karl Marx's writings on the American Civil War and how Karl Marx backed Abraham Lincoln, when I studied Marx's polemics with Bakunin and Proudhon, right, the poverty of philosophy, when I studied the Second International, right, and Mitterrand, right, and the Dreyfus Affair, right, and the fight over the Dreyfus Affair, and the fight with Edward Bernstein, right, when I read about Karl Kautsky and his rise and then his eventual turning against the Bolsheviks, when I really studied the polemical tradition of Marxism, that summer of 2010, I evolved miles politically. I stopped thinking of Marxism as a magical formula to save the world. Stopped thinking of Marxism in an idealist sense, and I started to think in a dialectical and historical materialist way. I came to really understand Marxism by reading the history of the Marxist movement, right, and the polemics and the Second International. I read the history of the Three Internationals by Foster. I just studied so much I studied that summer. And my worldview completely changed. I started to think in a scientific way. I had a lot of time to read, a lot of downtime to read, and I was, I really changed in that sense. No longer was Marxism simply magic. No longer was Marxism simply a utopian formula to build a better world. I understood why Marx backed Lincoln. I understood why Marxists had supported Franklin Roosevelt. The capitalist economy collapsed, and I started to think about Marxism in a much more scientific way. And so that was my biggest shift, because I think, there's a lot of people on the internet, God bless you, right? Do your thing, who talk about Marxism in kind of a juvenile way, right? They talk about Marxism, the Gonzaloists, right? Hey, I like the Naxals. They're the magical right kind of Marxist in India, and it's almost like a religion, right? It's like they want to be a Presbyterian, or they want to be a Lutheran, or they want to be a Calvinist, and I'm a Trotskyite, I'm a Maoist, I'm a Hojist. That's what you think of it as until you really get to understand it, until you can really start to understand it. And it was in 2010, I remember I started to develop an understanding of the fact that there were divisions in the ruling class. I started, Barack Obama was in office, he was in his first term, and some of the ruling class was with him and some were against him. And what was going on? What was going on? And I watched Rachel Maddow's show, and I thought, she's not the work, she's not a communist, right? So what's going on here? And I began to study the concept of divisions in the ruling class. And I read, for example, I read a very important book, by Georgy Dimitrov about fascism and the United Front against fascism. And I studied Trotsky's polemics with the Communist International. And the more I studied, the more I came to the conclusion. And I remember I said this at the time. I said to people, every revolution in history has started out as divisions within the ruling class. And that was a big thing that I said to people. And people looked at me and they said, well, we don't talk that way. We talk about the independence of the working class. We don't talk about divisions in the ruling class. But then I remember I went to New York City for a meeting, and there was an activist in New York City who took me aside and said, you really ought to read a book called The Yankee and Cowboy War, which makes a similar argument to what you make. And, eventually I moved to New York, and I got to be very close to an individual who was kind of a mentor to me and taught me about Marxist economics, right? More than anything, he taught me about economics, and we studied economics, and he taught me to think about economics. We talked about economics, and he would give me economic analysis, and he taught me to follow the oil markets. And my understanding of Marxism, in a couple short years was far greater, right? I mean, and now, look, I mean, I talk about divisions in the ruling class. I talk about overproduction. I talk about imperialism and the economics of imperialism. I didn't used to do all that, right? People think imperialism is the USA doing bad things to countries because it wants to make money off weapons. That's surface level. That's totally surface level. But dominating the world economy, keeping the world poor so that Wall Street and London can stay rich, beating down any competitor to maximize their profits. This is all deeper level Marxist understanding, right? And that summer of 2010 was the summer that I took the first steps in moving in that direction, right? A lot of Marxism on the surface level, it just looks like magic words. It's it's like, I remember, saying things like, well, Mao had the brilliant idea to continue the revolution after the revolution. Brilliant. No, 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 right? That a lot of Marxism is just kind of, a lot of what people who think they're Marxists think is just kind of religious, magical thinking, utopianism. But there's an actual science, right? When I first came around Marxist groups, I remember everyone was talking about the contradiction, the contradiction, the contradiction, the contradiction. I didn't know what they meant. No one ever bothered to explain to me. But I remember in the summer of 2010, and I just assumed contradiction meant like things not working out so well and all that. Well, no. Summer of 2010, I studied Hegel and the dialectics of nature and Engels, and I discovered that, there's this concept called the dialectic, right? That at first there's a thesis, then there's an antithesis. And those two things clash and produce a synthesis, right? And that the synthesis then becomes the new thesis, right? And the change comes through conflict, the Hegelian dialectic, contradiction, right? These were concepts that no one ever bothered to explain to me. And the reason they didn't explain it to me is most of the people walking around calling themselves Marxists don't understand them, right? Most of the people walking around calling themselves Marxists don't understand these concepts. Marxism is a very, very complex and deep philosophy. It's not how to have an activist group and protest with all your friends and smoke a lot of weed, right? Marxism is a very, very complex philosophical school of thought. Dialectical and historical materialism, right? I mean, anyway, I hope that answered the question. All right. Okay. Another question was about DSA. I mean, we talked about DSA in the intro quite a bit, so there you go. Did the United States help Saddam Hussein? At various points, yes. If you want to know the specifics about Saddam Hussein, there's a great video by the Flame of Liberation where Nick Maniaci talks about Saddam Hussein in great depth. He goes over the history of Ba'athist Arab socialism and Saddam Hussein. I'm sure, yes, the United States did help Saddam Hussein at various times. I don't know the specifics of it. All right. Juche and the DPRK. Well, Juche means self-reliance. It is an application of socialist and Marxist principles to the Korean Peninsula. It's the teachings of Kim Il-sung, and it is their ideology. And I think we should study it, just like I think we should study Bolivarianism and Maoism and, anything. I mean, any form of socialism, we should study it. We should study all of it, but blindly adhere to none of it. That has been my position. State capitalism. State capitalism is a real thing, right? This is the thing. So you get these people, first of all, when people are liars, right, which there's a lot of liars out there, they say, Caleb said socialism is when the government does stuff. No, I didn't. I've always been very clear that socialism is not simply when the government does stuff. I have been very clear about that, right? Singapore, the government is heavily involved in the economy. Singapore is not socialist. Saudi Arabia, the government is heavily involved in the economy. Saudi Arabia is not socialist. After World War II, in Britain, they nationalized almost everything. Was Britain ever socialist? No. Right? The difference between socialism and capitalism is production for profit or production for social need. Under socialism, production is carried out, as Frederick Engels put it, upon a predetermined plan for social benefit. Right? The means of production function for social benefit. Under capitalism, the means of production function for profit. Capitalism is production for profit. Socialism is production for social benefit. Socialized production versus privatized production. Production for profit versus production for social benefit. Singapore has a lot of government involvement in the economy, but the government facilitates production for profit by a small group of families that basically run the economy. Saudi Arabia, lots of government involvement in the economy. But does the economy work for the people? No. About a third of the country are guest worker slaves, right? And what the government does is it facilitates the making of profits by the owners, the Saudi royal family, the bin Laden family that has a state monopoly on construction. The state simply facilitates production for profit. If there's production for profit, that's capitalism. Saudi Arabia, production for profit. Singapore, production for profit. Britain, after World War II, the whole country had been destroyed by World War II, so they nationalized a lot of things. The government took over a lot of things. But, after the government took them over, right, it rebuilt them with taxpayer money and sold them off to private corporations. And even when they existed, they simply existed to facilitate production for profit. Production for profit, capitalism. Production for social good, socialism. So there's a difference, right? There's a big difference. No, it's not so, China has a big market sector, but that market sector is forced to do what is in the interests of society overall. The state forces the market sector to do what is in the interest. So it may not be publicly owned, but production is still forced to be carried out for social benefit. So there you go. There you go. Naxals versus Nazguls. I mean, I don't know. The Naxals are a group of, radicals in India who have become isolated and operate in Andhra Pradesh and a few other areas. Nazgul are fictional characters in Lord of the Rings. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the Nazgul in Lord of the Rings have like magical powers. The Naxals do not have magical powers. So, I mean, I don't know. I think the person asking the question was just trying to be funny, hinting at the fact that they have the same name. I probably am, I'm probably being like the ultimate, like, what do they call that? Where somebody like doesn't get the joke and they're just like playing along, right? I'm being the ultimate nerd, No, I do not know if my refrigerator is running. I will not go catch it. It's not that kind of running, right? It's the joke. You call somebody on the phone. Is your refrigerator running? Why, yes, sir, it is running. Then you better go catch it. Well, I cannot catch my refrigerator. It's running in the sense that it is turned on, but it is not. It is not actually running in the sense of like an Olympic runner. You see, I'm probably answering it in like that. I'm like one of the people who does not get the joke, and I am simply answering in the most monotone. But anyway, yeah, I get what you're getting at. Funny. Nazguls and Naxals sound the same. Nazguls are in Lord of the Rings. Naxals are a group of people in India. I did have a friend who used to make the joke. Because the reason they're called Naxals, right, the group in India, the reason they're called Naxals is because they started their rebellion in a place called Naxalbari. But I had a friend who said, I'd like to eat a Naxalberry. A Naxalberry. That sounds delicious. Can you get me some Naxalberries? I just think that's funny. But, is it a Naxalberry? That sounds delicious. I always thought that was a funny joke, but what do I know? Alrighty, folks. Alrighty. British Empire and socialism in Britain. Well, right. I mean, there was a faction, the Fabians, right? So, you had the British Labour Party, and there was a group of kind of like Christian socialists that were called the Fabians that were very pro-imperialist, the Fabian Society. H.G. Wells and others were associated with them. And they had a very kind of imperialist form of socialism, right? It was kind of managerial imperialism, the Fabian Society. H.G. Wells, Bertrand Russell, others. And those were not Marxists. They were kind of imperialist social democrats. Right? I think that's maybe what Frank was getting at with his question, right? And that, really, in a lot of ways, a lot of the most ugly aspects of capitalism, right? Like, the, free market, survival of the fittest, Malthusianism. These are all very British things. I mean, Milton Friedman and Friedrich von Hayek, they didn't invent this stuff. It came from Adam Smith, who was like the father of British economics. And look, this is the whole thing. This is what kind of annoys me, right? So we know about the 20th century, right? We know about the rise of communism and the rise of fascism. We're told, communism and fascism killed a lot of people. Why did communism and fascism come into existence? They came into existence because at the time that they came into existence, everybody knew that there was this other system called liberalism and Western capitalism that had killed millions and millions of people, right? The British Empire killed millions of people all over the world. In India, they killed millions of people. In China, they killed millions of people. In Africa, they killed millions of people. In Asia, they killed millions of people, right? I mean, look at the British they forced China to adopt free market capitalism at the point of a gun, 2 opium wars, devastated their economy, mass famines, mass deaths. India, they burned all the textile mills, burned the industries, forced the people, into their British free trade system. Millions of them starved to death, right? I mean, and in Africa, the British settlers would have these Gatling guns, right? These machine guns, and they would just go and just exterminate whole villages, just exterminate the whole village, right? And it'd just be piles of dead bodies, right? Rudyard Kipling justifies all of this. He writes this poem, "Take up the white man's burden. Give up the best ye breed," right? I mean, it's vile, and they're pushing white supremacism and racial theories and Malthusianism. All these other races are just inferior. See, Charles Darwin, he wrote this book called The Origin of Species, and it says that the survival of the fittest will survive, so we can just wipe out these people because they're inferior, and then they won't breed, see, and we'll breed, and we're the superior group, eh? That's how it's supposed to work, eh? There's too many of them. I mean, it was evil. British imperialism brought us free trade, monopoly capitalism, Adam Smith, globalism, poverty. So before the 20th century, there was this global system dominated by the British, and the Germans were in on it too, and the French, and in Belgium, right, the mass slaughter in the Congo. But everyone saw that this system that the British had kind of pioneered, that had gone global, called, capitalism in its monopoly stage or imperialism, was killing millions of people, right? Everybody knew that. Right? That the capitalist system was killing millions of people. Socialism and fascism and all the other ideas that came to dominate the 20th century emerged as a response to this, right? Fascism, communism, was merging. Fascism was an attempt to save capitalism and operated in kind of a Bonapartist controlled way. And, everything that happened in the 20th century was based on the fact that everybody knew that British free trade capitalist system wasn't going to work, right? But now we're in the 21st century. Nobody knows that, right? I had to tell Stefan Molyneux all of that when I debated him. He had no clue, right? Communism killed a gajillion million people, right? But I'm like, and capitalism, nobody knows this, right? I mean, capitalism right now in Central America, with the drug cartels, capitalism with the global crisis of mass migration, capitalism with, capitalism kills millions of people, but no one knows this anymore. No, everyone just knows these big numbers. Everyone knows these big numbers that are flown out in the name of communism. Nobody knows the death toll of capitalism, right? Iran, right? The British forced a famine on Iran and starved millions of people. Nobody knows that, right? And the whole reason that there was so much opposition to capitalism and ultimately concluding in the 20th century and the rise of communism and fascism, all of that was very much all of this was a response to the failure of free market economics. Wasn't it the Venetian method that started this? I have no idea about that. The Venetian method. What is the Venetian method? Is that Venice? Right? I don't know what you're getting at there. I don't know. I just know I know what's true, and I don't know what the Venetian method is. So, what is the Venetian method? I don't know. I don't know what that is, but there you go. All right, folks. Listen, it's been fun. It's been a fun night. There's some kind of fight going on in the chat. I don't even know what you guys are fighting about, but whatever. Hey, I'm having a great time, and whatever. So, anyhow, I'm going to end this the way I always end it. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. On that note, I'm out, folks. Have a good night.